The U.A.E. is a common destination for migrant workers who are looking for good job offers and generous payment. However, upon arrival, workers get their passports confiscated and are forced to work in extreme conditions without legal protection. According to the Global Slavery Index, there are about 37,000 people today living under modern-day slavery in the United Arab Emirates. The types of forced labor in the U.A.E. are prostitution, domestic labor, and building labor. According to the Global Slavery Index, the economic value of forced labor in the U.A.E. is of $67,000. The kafala system is U.A.E.'s sponsorship system that allows the government to control migrant workers through national sponsors who arrange the visa and employment contract of migrant workers. This system makes migrant workers vulnerable to forced labor as they are fully dependent on their employers. Foreign construction workers are forced to work under extreme conditions in the U.A.E. Lots of workers are unpaid, close to starvation, and overworked. These men are housed in cramped and unsanitary labor camps. Arab Tech, Dubai's largest construction firm, housed their workers in overcrowded labor camps, where the lack of water in the toilets caused massive piles of human feces to pile up and spread across the living space and rooms of the workers. According to Sarah Hamza, the U.A.E. has more than 700 deaths and 90 suicides of construction workers per year because of the horrible conditions migrant workers are forced to live with. According to George Richards, at least 2 Indian workers commit suicide every week in Dubai by jumping from construction sites or by running into the traffic. Women travel to the U.A.E. to be in the service sector, but once they arrive, their passports are taken and they are forced to work in horrible conditions that lead to forced labor or prostitution. According to Claire Dishang et al., 146,000 migrant domestic workers work in the U.A.E., most of them being from Africa and Asia. In the U.A.E., there are no labor protection laws for migrant domestic workers. Because of the lack of legal protection, employers usually underpay, overwork, and abuse domestic workers. My boss started hitting me after 2 weeks of being there. She hit me with her fist to my chest, she scraped her fingernails on my neck, and slapped my face. I was bruised on my neck. She sometimes pulled out tufts of my hair. This was an Indonesian girl's description of her working experience as a domestic worker in the U.A.E. The worker said she remained there, hoping to be paid, but never was. On May of 2017, 8 U.A.E. princesses of the royal house of Abu Dhabi were tried in Brussels for human trafficking and inhumane treatment to their domestic servants. They were said to withdraw their employees' wages, feed them their leftovers, overwork them, and prohibit them to leave of the house. The princesses insulted their servants by calling them cows, dogs, and whores. In 2008, one of the girls managed to escape the princess's hotel suite in Brussels and contacted the authorities. Finally, after 8 years of legal process, the case finally went to court. However, the princesses remained unscathed as their family is immensely rich and influential. Victims of human trafficking are poor girls that come from countries that are conflicted by war or natural disasters. These young girls are tricked by fake employment agents into the sex industry. Sophia, a 16-year-old girl, arrived to the U.A.E. in hopes of finding a job and sending back money to her family. In Abu Dhabi, Sophia worked for a family where she cleaned the house and took care of 9 children. Sophia worked all day long and was paid about $9 a month. For 4 months, the family paid Sophia her wages, but then they stopped paying her. After months of unpaid labor, Sophia fled in fear, wandering the streets of Abu Dhabi alone and scared. A taxi driver from Sophia's hometown offered her help and promised to find her a job in Dubai. In Dubai, the taxi driver sold Sophia to prostitution for $8 without Sophia's knowledge. Inside her employer's house, Sophia was given makeup and told to look for men. Sophia refused to work as a prostitute and insisted she was only there to clean. As a punishment, Sophia was beat up and locked. A few days later, Sophia still refused to be a prostitute. As a punishment, the woman in charge of the prostitution ring held down Sophia and opened her legs with the help of 4 other prostitutes. The woman then inserted chili on Sophia's genitals until Sophia couldn't endure the pain anymore and finally agreed to prostitution. Sophia was forced to have intercourse multiple times a day with men. Finally, after one of the other women forced to prostitution managed to call the police, Sophia and the other girls were rescued. Sophia remained in the shelter receiving counseling for 3 months before returning home. U.S. Shelter for Women and Children Victims of Human Trafficking is a local NGO that operates in the country. These shelters are located in secret locations. They provide victims with emotional and medical help. Victims of human trafficking are taught computer skills and embroidery to be able to make a living once they get back to their countries. The shelter delivers victims home and gives them enough money to survive. U.A.E.'s effort against slavery started when the number of labor trafficking prosecutions and punishments for late wage payments increased. The U.A.E. government enforced labor reforms to minimize the amount of forced labor among foreign workers in the private sector. The U.A.E. has made the National Committee to Combat Human Trafficking bigger by adding public prosecutors, law enforcement officials, victim shelters, and representatives of the Human Rights Association. Still, officials didn't enforce U.A.E.'s prohibition of employers taking workers' passports, and the legal protection of domestic workers was feeble. Trafficking prosecutors focus more on sex trafficking victims than in labor trafficking. Based on the government's efforts to destroy human trafficking, the U.S. Department of State placed the U.A.E. in Tier 2. Tier 2 countries have governments who do not meet with the minimum requirements of the Trafficking Victim Protection Acts, but are making enough efforts to reach those standards. To help stop human trafficking, we may help by spreading awareness about human rights violations through social media. We can also stick to buying only fair trade products that will put an end to the use of cheap slaves for labor manufacturing. If you are a survivor of modern-day slavery, don't be afraid to share your story, because that will raise awareness about modern-day slavery. We can also help by donating to anti-trafficking organizations like Anti-Slavery International. Together, we can all make a change. Remember that one person's efforts can be another's salvation. For more information about modern-day slavery, check out the organization End Slavery Now via their webpage.